Alright everybody, it's good to see you're all back again. I've been getting some email about whether or not these things will give you power, more power over your stock setup. Unfortunately, carbs don't really give you that much extra power. It's a small enough gain to be considered psychological, really. It's just kind of the downside to it. However, if you have, let's say you've got some work done to your head, you've got some high lift cams or supporting, or maybe a 3-angle valve grind, in that case, carbs will help your motor quite a bit over the stock TDIS setup, because they just breathe better, and your engine's only as strong as the weakest link, and if you've got some porting done, the weakest link is the TDIS, which will get sped up somewhat, and with these carbs like this, that's no longer the issue. Now I'm going to show you guys some of the jets. You'll lift this little cap you see on top of the carb, you lift it out, and there's the two jets which I showed you earlier in a different video, and this is what you end up with. I don't know how clear it is from over there, but I'll try to help this out. This is your main jet, and this is your idle jet. Now your idle jet has a holder. I don't even know the literal name for it. It holds, let's see if we can get this apart. This just holds the jet in the carburetor. This is the actual jet, and they're all gauged on the side. You can see a little number there. And to be honest, if I explain to you what jets you need, if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll get totally lost. So I'll probably write that up on a write-up later. But you stick the jets in like this, and you drop them in right there. Now, the main jet is actually quite a bit more complicated than the idle jet. It's got the holder. Ooh, that's never good. Let me go get that. Yeah, that's the other thing. You don't want to do this on a gravel surface, otherwise you might lose one of these little pieces. Here's the main jet holder. And we'll put it right there. And this big piece in the middle is called the emulsion tube. There's different ones, and to be honest, the difference between them is, honestly, it's astronomically weird. There is really no reasoning for why they make them the way they do. They just do. I've looked all over the place for a write-up, and nobody was very clear. On the top here is a little jet, and I'm trying to think of what this is called. It's a little plug. It's got a hole in it. What it does is it delivers air at the top of your RPM range, and so this is necessary to get this engaged right, especially for drifting, because you're always high in the RPM, or racing, whatever you end up doing. I'm using a 175 currently. I might go up to a 180. Who knows? My emulsion tube is an F11, which is kind of the middle of what I don't know, because as I said before, emulsion tubes make no sense to nobody. Seriously, that's just like the one that comes in your carb. Use it. It won't make a difference. And your main jet is at the bottom here of the emulsion tube. It's got a little, I don't know how it's exactly shaped, but they all come out and they're interchangeable, and you'll learn eventually to switch them up pretty quick. You can buy the jets at just about any Weber carburetor sales place, or for that matter. Now, if you're running Solex, or Meinekes, or however you say that name, I can't think at the moment. You're going to need different jets. You can't use these jets. They're all different. So that's the reason I went with Weber's, because they're the most readily available, seeing as they're still produced currently. You can get them off eBay for about $300 or $400 or so. I just saw a set go on sale for two Solex carburetors straight from Japan with real short air stacks, a manifold, and a throttle cable linkage for like $499. It was a steal of a deal. Whoever got that got a great deal on what they jumped on. That was because that's a complete drop-in and bolt set. I've spent probably a good $700, maybe more, on my complete setup over time. I should have just jumped on that, but you know, when you're learning, you don't really know what you're getting into. The length of your stack actually has a lot to do with your, and also your manifold has a bit to do with how your engine also reacts a bit. Long stacks give you good mid-range power, good for street applications, and short-range stacks are good high-end power, or I should say quickly revving. It gets there a lot faster. And so if you're looking to drift or race or autocross, you want a shorter stack. Also, get an air filter. You hit a puddle, you pick up a piece of dirt, it gets in here, it gets in your motor, you are very screwed. So don't run an engine without an air filter. You see race cars, they do it sometimes. They don't really care. They rebuild their motors once every race or 2 races. If you have that kind of budget, yeah, run without an air filter. You will see slight power gains, but you know, if you're not in the budget to rebuild your motor every day or 2, I wouldn't suggest running without air filters. Right now I have none because I can't afford them yet. I'm just trying to get this thing to work. The air filters and the stacks will be coming next. There was one more thing I was going to talk about. Yeah, I discussed the jets. Also, once you get your carb set up, there's a bit of tuning that's going to happen. On the top end, you got your idle jets, and what happens is when you get them all in, you turn everything off. In other words, these air bleed screws, these should stay off all the time. These are only get opened if you've got a particularly odd setup and one of your throttle linkages is a little more closed than the rest. That shouldn't happen ever anyways. So these should stay closed all the time. Your idle jets should be 1.5 turns out from lightly seated. Don't seat it too heavy, you're going to break stuff and you're going to spend a long time trying to fix it, if not completely replacing your carburetor. So from lightly seated, 1.5 turns out. After about 2.5 turns out, okay, well, let me back up. 1.5 turns out on each screw. Once you get the motor running, you're going to want to turn them in slightly. It's going to sound like a tractor, but you're going to want to turn them in slightly until the engine runs worse. Then you turn it out to where it ran best, and you go down through the whole setup until you get an even sound across. Only then can you mess with the idle speed screw, which is down here. It's the screw that touches your throttle cable linkage. Now what happens with this is you screw it in until it touches, until you see your throttle cable, your throttle linkage start to move. Then you screw it out, bring the linkage back to base setting, and then you screw it in and listen to the motor. Only do this while the motor is running, of course. You screw it in until you hear the motor run at its best idle speed. Don't screw it in more than half a turn. If you're going in more than half a turn, you've got a problem. Back it off. Take a look at your jet setup. These things, remember I said 1.5 turns out is basic. To get them all as even as close as possible, a 1/4 turn adjustment on each after that is good. Probably the best you can do. However, if you end up being more than 2.5 turns out, you need to go up a size in your idle jet, because you should not be more than 2.5 turns out from lightly seated on any of these guys, or you've got a problem with your idle jet. Let's see, what have I not covered? Oh, news from last time. I finally got my my throttle linkage hooked up. There was a big bar here, and I was going to do it, but the problem was that my my linkage, when it went all the way to full open throttle, would be interfered with by the I don't know. There's a little bent piece of metal here that connects the 2 throttle linkages. There's a little connector here, and it would have interfered with the travel. So what I ended up doing is actually kind of cheap, but I'll show you guys because I'm cheap. What I ended up doing is, I don't know if we can, oh, come on. Sorry, this looks like this is going to be shown in video too. Give me 1 second.